Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a writing coach, a manuscript editor, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with Andrea Koppel. She's the host of the This Magic Life podcast. Hi, Andrea. Welcome to One-to-One.
Hi, John. It's great to be here.
It's great to be with you. And we've known each other for a long time. And there are a lot of things I want to talk about, but I think the main thing is this magic life. Um, there's so much that goes into this of your own passion.
Mm.
Because you're basically trying to help people, especially young professionals, college grads, figure out what to do with their life. And you would think it would be easy, but it's not. Or maybe it is.
It actually is a whole lot easier than a lot of people realize. And the reason that I am so excited about this new show that just launched on May 22nd is that, as you know, I had another podcast before. I interviewed over 350 professionals in dozens of industries, all kinds of jobs, including you,
Yeah.
and began to see the cross-cutting themes through so many of their career journeys. And what I came to realize, and have since supplemented with lots of reading and many more interviews, is the fact that most of us could never have predicted in a million years what we would be doing today based on what we studied as undergrads and what we thought we were going to do.
Well,
And the
and
reason for so much of that is because of something called serendipity. The fact that we cannot imagine how these magical things happen in our lives, running into somebody who we've haven't seen for a million years, who tells us about a job opening in an industry that we didn't even know existed, or the fact that, as was the case with one of my most recent guests, Stephen Kotler, he got sick with Lyme disease
hmm,
and was bedridden for over 2 years, and ended up, because he had been a surfer before he got sick, ended up going out for basically friends brought him out on the waves just as a way to break him out of this deep depression he had fallen into. And he got into something called flow.
hmm,
He is now the executive director of the Flow Research Institute, which he went on to found. This was a guy who studied creative writing as an undergrad and had been a journalist and a writer. So there's so many things that happen to us, good and bad, which is why I call it magic. Sometimes
right,
it's fairy dust, at other times it's black magic,
right.
that happen to us that push or pull us in directions we could never have anticipated.
So, and I'm pretty sure that this is probably the case for you as well. Are you doing what you started out and anticipated doing? You have a BA in political science, Asian studies, Chinese. You were a journalist at CNN for 14 years. How did, how did, how is what you're doing now so different from what you started out doing?
Well, first of all, podcasting didn't even exist when I was in college. And that's
Right.
something for young people to keep front of mind, and mid-career folks to keep in front of mind. Technology is changing so rapidly. Cell phones didn't exist when I was in school. Wi-Fi didn't exist. Electric cars didn't exist. The idea that we could stream a live interview across a platform called StreamYard, that
Right.
didn't exist.
Exactly.
So I couldn't imagine something that didn't exist. But I think what happens is, when you take action, when you follow your interests, when you follow your curiosity, serendipity happens.
How do you define serendipity?
So, great question. Serendipity is something that is unexpected, that is a chance occurrence, that is meaningful to you. So, there are lots of unexpected things that happen to us every day. They may not have much meaning, right? You go to cross the street, a car honks at you, and you almost get hit. That's not particularly meaningful. It becomes serendipitous if the person pulls over the car, gets out to yell at you because you were jaywalking, and you realize this is somebody you haven't seen for 20 years, who is a long lost friend who you never had their contact information. And it was like, thank goodness that happened.
Is this
That
a real event that
No,
you're
I just made
conveying?
that up on the
Okay.
fly. I just
Okay.
made that up, but
It
I'll give you
it could be.
real examples from my life, John.
Okay.
You mentioned what my major was when I was in college. I studied those subjects because I thought I was going to become an American diplomat. And then my senior year, I took the Foreign Service exam and I failed it. Didn't know I was supposed to
That
study.
must have been devastating.
I don't remember being particularly shaken up by it. I just remember thinking like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not doing that." That's a quality that I have found among people who have a lot of serendipities. You have a growth mindset. You're somebody that takes those curveballs in stride. That doesn't mean that if you get hit by one, it doesn't sting. Like when I got fired by CNN after I'd been there for 14 years, the new president of CNN didn't renew my contract. I didn't like that, getting kicked to the curb. But the truth was, John, I had been unhappy at CNN for several years before that, but was too afraid to quit.
What were you afraid
Why
of?
was I afraid?
Yeah.
I didn't think there was anything else I could do. I thought the only thing I could do was to be a journalist. And I knew that really wasn't going to be the right fit for me going forward. And I also didn't have headspace. You know what it's like working at a place like CNN. It's crazy. You're working all the time. I was also a new mother, which was the reason why I wasn't happy there. And I never saw my young son.
Yeah.
So you combine all of those things together. I felt stuck. And I was also earning a lot of money. And I thought, well, what else am I going to do where I can earn a salary like that? So I kind of got caught up in my head. When I was fired, suddenly I was able to dream. I was able to have coffee with people and talk to them about what other options there were for someone like me. But I went
There's a
off
grief component there though too, correct?
a grief component. Oh,
Sure.
sure. The processing and feeling the feelings, absolutely. But if we go back to college, so there my my dreams of becoming an American diplomat went sideways.
Right.
I want to fast forward 13 years. Could I have ever predicted, John, that I was going to be CNN's State Department correspondent reporting on American diplomats and American foreign policy? So, you cannot predict how what you study, your interests are going to kind of get mashed up and squeezed out into another shape, size, form. You cannot predict this.
And it would
So
seem to
it really
me
was serendipity.
It seems to me that one of the biggest impediments to being able to access that serendipity is that mindset that,
Mm,
you get stuck in your head in terms of what your identity is. Am I onto something there?
I would say yes. And this is so relevant for somebody who's lost their job, who is sick, who's had an accident, who maybe is about to graduate or going to, whether it's has just graduated without a job, and they're caught up in anxiety
Right.
and fear and pain, right? These are all very difficult and very real emotions. And there are ways that you can, first of all, you want to feel those feelings and work through them. I'm not a therapist. I've seen therapists over the years. Some of them are good, some of them are not great, but it is a useful process to kind of get to know yourself better, develop more self awareness, and work through some difficult emotions. But the most important thing is not to allow yourself to be stagnant, to sit alone in your apartment or in your room, just feeling sorry for yourself. You need to get out. You need to meet new people. You don't have to get out literally. You can go on a platform like LinkedIn.
Right.
You can have a Zoom conversation or a FaceTime conversation with people to learn more about what they're doing or just to get ideas about things to do. You can join different clubs.
And it doesn't
You
matter
can,
if you're an introvert or an extrovert, either of those
correct,
temperaments.
correct.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say for those who are introverted, and I think I myself, I'm both an extrovert and an introvert. So I love being around people. I get lots of energy from that. But after many days of nonstop, I like to kind of go back into my own space
Yeah.
and recharge and read and do things that are more nourishing to me in a different way. So I would say if you're an introvert, that doesn't mean that you have to suddenly become like the nonstop coffee talker. You can you can fill your day in a way that you're recharging in between these more extroverted activities.
You talk about you have something called career magic method,
Yes.
that's attitude, attention, and actions. And
Yes.
talk about that. And especially, I'm interested in how a person can, in a sense, who's in this situation, they are afraid. There's anxiety. There's probably grief involved. How do they get off dead center? What's the trick here?
Yes. So let me break it down. This is a framework that I've developed that is a kind of a formula to attract more serendipities and more magic into your life. And the first being your attitude, your mindset. I mentioned a growth mindset before. That means you're somebody who tends to see those curveballs, who tends to see the fails as opportunities for learning. You're also somebody who follows your curiosity. You have things that interest you and you pursue them. You read about it, you talk with people about it. So it's a wonderful way, it's a North Star for you to follow. You're also somebody who has more of an optimistic approach to life. Somebody who is, well, this is not going to work. And that sounds like a stupid idea. And why would I want to try that? Is not the right kind of mindset to attract serendipity. And why is that? I'm not saying you don't have a bad mood. I'm not saying you don't occasionally see something and say, that doesn't work for me. People want to be around other people who make them feel good. If you're Debbie Downer or Doug Downer, chances are you're not going to have a lot of people who are going to want to grab a coffee with you or who are going to want to invite you to join them at such and such a gathering.
Because you'll be
So
talking about all your problems.
because you're the kind of person who just bitches and moans and kvetches and right. Nobody, I'm not saying you can't share that with your trusted friends, your posse, or
Right.
your therapist, right?
Right.
Yes, have an outlet. But I'm saying if you want to attract these incredible, unexpected serendipity, synchronicities in your life, your attitude matters a lot. Your attention matters as well. And by that, I mean that you have a focus. If you're all over the map, that's where your energy goes. If you're diverted in 10 directions, it's going to be really hard to call into your life that one or two things that you really want. And in this case, we're talking about a job or a career, right? So it doesn't have to be like, oh, Andrea, I don't have that passion.
Mhm.
You notice I haven't used that word until now.
Mhm.
I've used the word interest. It's a lower bar. Passion, a passion is something that is discovered by testing, by iterating, by experimenting. So find a focus, your intention, focus it on one or two interests and go there. Follow those. Keep your focus on a couple of possibilities. And then the last being action. I mentioned right? It's going to be very hard for synchronicities to happen if you are a homebody most of the time. You need to get out there. You need to, your friend says, hey, so and so's having a barbecue. And you're like, oh, you know, it's hot. There's going to be mosquitoes or whatever. I don't really feel like going. Go out there. Go for walks.
Yeah.
Get outside. If you like to cycle, maybe join a cycling club. The more people you meet, the more your network grows. The chances are you're going to have more opportunities for serendipity. If I could rewind just a moment to back when I was a senior, I had just graduated from Middlebury. I thought I was going to go into the Peace Corps. That was the next thing. So didn't pass the Foreign Service exam. I then followed my curiosity, ended up discovering the Peace Corps came to recruit on campus. I thought, well, I wanted an adventure with the Foreign Service. Here's an adventure. I could go for 2 years to a country. I wanted to go to Nepal. I was accepted. And then a month before I was supposed to go, this was in August after I had graduated, we learn through serendipity, some random person painting my parents' house who mentions there had been a number of acts of violence against American women in Nepal who were Peace Corps volunteers.
Whoa.
I confirmed it. So I didn't have anything to do. There I was in August. My plan B went sideways.
Whoa.
A friend of my parents, John, who lived in Beijing, happened to be in the US. He came to visit them here in Maryland, where I'm still living. He said, oh, I was just in New York. Andrea doesn't have a job. There's this woman, Virginia Kamsky, who only hires young women who speak Mandarin. Oh, and she has a job. She has a job open. Okay, what are the chances? That is serendipity, right?
Right.
My parents' friend who lived in China, he was not somebody who traveled very often. In fact, he worked for Radio Beijing. He just happened to be here. So I went for the interview. I wasn't interested in business, which is what this was, but I didn't have another option, and it was an adventure. So I took the job. I was on a plane at age 21, flying to Beijing, didn't like the job, but my friends outside of work were all journalists.
Ah,
and I heard their stories, and I listened, and I said, oh, so here's another thing that I didn't mention. We had your attitude, your attention, and action.
right.
Attention, the other component to this is not just focusing outward, but it's focusing inward, listening to that feeling that you get, that some people call a gut feeling, others call it your intuition, but it's an inner knowing. And you're going to get really good at this as you progress through life, because we get a feeling. It's like a little tingle, a little excitement. I can actually feel energy moving through my body because I do a lot of meditation and I've become much more attuned to this. But my intuition told me back then in Beijing that I needed to become a journalist. So I quit and I flew back to the DC area, and a few months later began that journey.
I want to go back to something you said a minute ago about taking action. One of the things that I've noticed in myself is that if you feel a certain way, down or something, but you
Mm.
do it anyway, the emotions follow.
Oh,
You don't have to wait till
yes.
you don't have to wait till you feel like, oh, I'm going to go to the barbecue. You go, and then
Ah,
once you're there, you feel like,
yes.
well, I want to be the last one to leave.
I love that. And I'll add something to that I've discovered, I guess, in a much more mindful way probably in the last year, John. And that is, you can shift your mood even before you get to the barbecue by putting on your favorite music,
Ah,
and preferably upbeat music.
yeah.
And if you live in an apartment with other people, go in your bedroom, close the door, put on your headphones, and dance like a maniac.
Well, I'm
You're
kind
going to
of shy about that.
change your energy.
Yeah.
You're going to change the energy in your body. And I'm going to show you something here. So, this
Oh,
is a classical Chinese character for qi,
mhm.
which means energy.
Ah,
The human body is 99.9999999% energy. And so is my cell phone. So is this cup. All matter. All matter is energy plus information. So when you feel the tingles of intuition or that bad mood that feels like a dark, wet blanket that's just been dropped over your head, or whatever your mood is, it's a vibrations that go through our body. So you can hack your own biology using music, or maybe watching something that's super funny that gets you laughing and snaps you out of
right.
that mood that you're in.
So now you're also an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland in the journalism school, right? Uh,
It is, but I'm not teaching
well, that
journalism.
I think I saw somewhere it was career clarity. Is that what it's called?
Yes. So this is a digital course that I created almost 3 years ago, that helps students who are stuck, who don't know what they want to do when they graduate, which is why I've had students from the physics department, students from the architecture department, the business school, studying math, every major you can imagine, take this class, and it gives them ideas for how to turn that major into different job functions that align with their strengths, and then how to take their interests and how those line up with different industries. So it takes them from confusion to at least 3 options that they can then pursue in terms of the kinds of jobs that would be a good fit for them in the kinds of companies and industries that would interest them.
I have a follow-up, Madam President. The one of the things I've observed in the relationships and conversations I've had with younger people is that they're under a lot of pressure from their parents. You know, you got to
Yes.
find a career that's going to make money. But I don't want to go into business. Yeah, but there's money there. Um, how do you help,
Mm,
especially young, impressionable college kids who are, there's the parents are paying, in many cases they're paying the freight. So how do you help them differentiate from the parents without wrecking the family in the process?
yes.
That's got to be a delicate dance.
So I would say that's a very relevant question for the post that I just made today on LinkedIn. That is a clip from this week's This Magic Life interview with James Altucher, who is a multiple New York Times best-selling author. He is former hedge fund manager, serial entrepreneur, very successful guy who has worn so many different hats over the years. It's a great interview. And in the clip that I posted, he says, in your 20s, don't follow the money. Don't take a job just because you're going to make a lot of money. Because just in this case, he said $50,000. Just because you start off at $50,000 doesn't mean your salary is going to keep growing
But
year on year.
what about crushing student debt, student loan debt?
I'm not saying don't be practical in the sense that you know what the minimum is that you need to earn. But in the case of James, he said he had 2 options when he graduated from college and he had studied computer science. One was to work at one of the big banks, and the other was to work at HBO. The big bank salary was, as you could imagine, a much larger sum of money. The HBO salary was not so much. And he had people in his life who were urging him to take the money. James, go for the money. And he didn't. And he said, and it's so true, he said, I wasn't interested in banking. I was so interested in entertainment. And in particular, he loved the programming that HBO was doing. And he took a job as like an associate somebody in the IT department. He ends up following his intuition, following his curiosity and his interests, and he stepped through the fear that so many of us feel. He marched into the CEO's office as this young, early 20 something guy because he had an idea for what ended up becoming one of the first web TV series. He walked into the CEO's office. The guy looks up. He's like, who are you? He's like, I'm James. I work in the IT department and I have an idea. You have all this space on your website that you're not taking advantage of. And you, HBO, you're such an amazing production house of all these incredible programs. You should be doing a show that is streaming on the web. And nobody was doing that.
And
And
yet
so he said,
yeah.
go do it. Can you believe he said, go
Well,
do it?
and corporate America, the middle manager that he leapfrogged to
Oh,
go into Mr. Big's office, there must have been some blowback there, right?
there wasn't blowback because there was nothing they could do. He had gotten the green light from the CEO And he did this for 3 years. He produced the show. I don't want to give it all away, but he almost got blocked from going into the CEO's office by his boss's boss.
Right. I wanted
And she said, "You can't go in." And he just ignored her and went in.
you mentioned fear, and I teach a class on for writers on overcoming your writing fears. But fear
Mm.
is fear, no matter what it is you're talking about. And one of the things I talk about, and I'd like your opinion on this, is that courage, I define courage as fear in action. It's
Mm.
not the absence of fear. It's
Yeah.
harnessing it and going forward anyway. Just like the
Yes.
guys on Normandy at D-Day 80 years
Yes.
ago this
Yes.
month.
Yes.
They
Yes.
were afraid, but they went forward anyway. That's courage.
It's courage. And I would say I love that imagery, but with all due respect, I would just say to myself and probably most of us nowadays, the fear that we're experiencing is not life or death.
Exactly.
It's not
But
about
but emotions
going
exaggerate.
on to the beach at Normandy under, the hail of gunfire and all this stuff.
But it
What
feels
it
like it.
is,
But it
it
feels like it.
does. It does. Absolutely. And that's because the amygdala in our brain, that primitive fight, flight, or freeze mechanism in our brain that was embedded there by the great creator
Yeah.
to save us from the woolly mammoth or the saber-toothed tiger, has been overstimulated by this, by CNN, by MSNBC, by Fox, by the 24-hour news cycle. And the fact that especially young people cannot escape the stories of school shooting,
Yeah.
the stories of Black Americans getting murdered by people with badges,
Right.
by economic, oh my God, the world is coming to an end, the recession, the inflation, AI is going to take everyone's jobs. It's overstimulated.
Yeah.
And so what I teach, and I'd love to hear how you inspire your students to take action, but I think one of the best self-care things that we can do is to find different ways that work for us to calm that ancient part of our brain. I do it through daily meditation and exercise and eating, fueling my body in such a way that I'm not getting spikes of insulin.
Right.
And there are a lot of other ways, yoga and breath work, all different tools that are out there that can help us to calm that part of the brain so that we can get out of the fear mode and
And
get
you
into the focus mode.
and you probably came across these methods through serendipity as well.
Yeah. I'm sure if I started unpacking some of the ways that I had learned, I don't remember. I'd have to give that
Yeah.
some more thought.
It must go way
But
back.
but I would say it's also my curiosity. I'm not just curious about what people do for a living or American foreign policy or the politics on Capitol Hill, which I covered. I'm curious about a million things, John. And I'm one of these people who I love to learn
Right. Well,
and grow.
and that's why you're perfectly suited for, well, you were perfectly suited for journalism. I was one of your editors from time to time when you were in Beijing, and we're still on speaking terms, so that's encouraging. But
Mhm.
journalism. I mean, one of the job one is accuracy. Job two is curiosity, or you can even flip them. But you've
Mm.
got your dad, Ted Koppel, was for the longest time the host of Nightline
Yeah.
on ABC, and fabulous interviewer. I actually interviewed him a long time ago, back in the 80s. And I would
Wow.
imagine that you picked up a few tips on interviewing and curiosity from him. Am I right?
Yes, and trust me, I'm not the only one he shared this with. It's so funny. I used to feel at times when he would give me the father-daughter, moments of like, here's some advice. I would think, ooh, privileged information. And then I hear him share it with everyone and anyone. So here it is. You need to listen, which is something you do a phenomenal job of.
Oh, thank you.
Listen to what your guest is saying. It's another way of being in flow, of being present.
Right.
And so much of the fear, the overstimulated amygdala, has us afraid of our future. But guess what? None of us has a crystal ball. The things that you're catastrophizing
Good word.
that may happen because of X, Y, and Z may not happen. And the thing that kept me in that job at CNN was the fact that my amygdala was so overstimulated. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was under immense amounts of stress. I was eating crap, right? I wasn't exercising regularly. So all of these things led to my fear that there was nothing else I could do other than be a journalist.
Mhm. At the beginning of COVID, I came across Eckhart Tolle's writing. I don't know if it's Tolle or Tolle, Tolle.
Yeah.
One of the
Yes.
things he
The
stresses is that we spend all our time either regretting the past or fearing the future, but it's in the moment where we really have the control.
Yeah, his book is one of them, The Power of Now. I think it's
Power of
been
now.
sold many, many millions of times, and it's a fantastic read, and it's a discipline to be present.
So in your personal life, how do you structure your day?
Mm.
How does that all work?
So, I will say what I'm about to share with you is a relatively new structure, but I get up at 6 AM. I have something.
With or without an alarm?
No, I have an alarm.
Okay.
I
Just
have an
checking.
alarm.
Okay.
Um, and I will also say that I think about sleep hygiene. So it's also about when I go to sleep. Saturday night, there was a friend's book party. I didn't get to sleep until 11:30. So obviously there are times when I'm going to go to bed later, but I try to go to bed around 10.
Yeah.
If I go to bed at 10:30 and I read before I go to sleep, if I'm into a chapter or something, I stay with it. But I get up at 6. I just bought this very cool device called Brain Tap, which is their headphones and this visor that comes down, and the visor has wave frequencies and light frequencies. And I listen to a 20-30 minute, it's like a meditation. Um, and they have different purposes. One is to help you focus, another is to maybe help you start your day feeling full of energy, or all different things. I did a session. I'm now doing them 3 times a day, the middle of the day. This one was more like, again, de-stressing. I was so chill, John. I had trouble getting up from the couch, you know? And then I do it in the evening. But so I start with that. I come in, I'm taking a bajillion supplements right now because I'm detoxifying from mold and from Lyme. I have
Oh
another.
my.
So I have all of these supplements that I have to take. That takes like 20 minutes. I do that. I make coffee. If I don't have a session with a to lift weights in a gym with a trainer, I ride my Peloton.
Okay.
I do that in the morning, and then I sit down in front of the computer,
About what time is
and
that? About what time would that be?
every day is, yeah, I'm not super rigid. I want to say 8-ish.
Okay.
Okay, because it depends.
Emphasis
Like
on the ish.
today,
Yeah.
ish,
Yeah.
very heavy on the ish. I was gonna say, so today I I showered and washed my hair for you, John,
Oh,
and
bless
for your
you.
viewers. So I don't do that every day, only if I have to do a podcast interview and it's on YouTube in addition to being on Spotify and Apple. But I washed my hair, dried it, and I put on makeup for you, John, and your viewers. So I did that. That took a little more time this morning. And then I have an interview tomorrow. So I was prepping for my interview, putting in a few hours. Believe it or not, he's a PhD who did his dissertation on synchronicities. And this has been his whole life. So I'm reading all of this fascinating research
Yeah.
and evidence out there about synchronicity, serendipity. So I'll do that. There are times I'll meet somebody for lunch or meet somebody for coffee. I'll work on social media clips or my newsletter, or there are other things that I do. Yeah. So that's so I get up, I meditate, I exercise and take my supplements. And then I also cook. So I cook what I eat most of the, let's say 95% of the time.
You made breakfast for me when we did the
That's
interview.
right. Do you remember
You're a
what I
good cook.
made?
I think it was scrambled eggs. It was nothing
Oh,
fancy.
okay.
I'm pretty
Oh,
sure it was
that
that.
is nothing fancy.
But Martha Stewart makes great scrambled eggs, and my
Yeah.
wife Cindy just watched one of Martha's
Oh, one of her
things,
videos.
and yeah, and it was excellent. It was excellent. But you're a
Yes.
good cook. You're an excellent
So
cook.
I like to cook, but I also try to cook very like whole foods.
Right.
So
I'm
that
not
might take 45 minutes sometimes to do that, so it's taking.
I'm not hearing anything about writing. Do you journal? Are you going to write a
I
book?
do not. I want to write a book, John.
Ah,
I do, but I
good.
do not journal. I have a journal. I have one, and it's actually more of a gratitude journal.
Okay.
So I've done that. And so I haven't been as disciplined, but I'll
Well, you can't do
meditate now
everything. You
3
can't do
times a day,
everything. Yeah. But it sounds like
and reading.
a book is sort of in the
Oh,
background there.
100%. I have
Oh,
the
good.
title, everything picked out.
What
Um,
what's the title?
Surf Serendipity.
Okay. Okay. Let me switch gears just a little. Because of your journalism background, um, you have a lot of on the ground experience as a journalist. And we are now living in an age where journalists aren't trusted anymore. No
Mm,
institution is trusted anymore because of Donald Trump and his followers. I'm not going to necessarily try to get you into politics, but I wrote the interview that you did with me was when I wrote Fake, my
mm.
fifth novel, because I was troubled that Trump was calling journalists enemies of the American people. And we're coming up on the 2024 election. It's amazing. It seems to me the Republican Party is a cult. It's I don't know where people are getting their news because we no longer can agree on even what the facts are. Um, Help me understand from your perspective, based on the conversations that you have with people, um, what your impression is about where journalism is, where it's going. Are we in trouble? It's an open-ended question, and then we'll see where it goes. Have fun with it.
Yeah, the truth is, John, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not devoting much time or energy to analyzing the state of journalism. I know you and I had an exchange before we started the interview, and I shared with you that I don't watch news.
I don't
I don't
either.
get it from broadcast. The only thing I watch is when my sister has a story on CBS Sunday morning, or my father
Yeah.
has a story on CBS Sunday morning. I read, and I tend to do like I read The Atlantic. I love The Atlantic. I like long form, some of these stories. I do read the New York Times. I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. I get CNN's top 5 things. I read that. I put very little time compared to what I used to do, which was 24/7,
Right.
into the news. I have hope that journalism and good journalism will continue to get done. And it's because of the young people that I see at the University of Maryland, the Merrill School, the ones who are not deterred by the lifestyle. And I'll tell you, a lot of them who start out majoring in journalism end up saying, I don't want that lifestyle.
Right.
And I can't blame them. It
Exact.
is hard. It
Brutal.
is really, especially the kind of journalism that you and I did, working for the kind of, and nowadays it's much worse than it was because I didn't have to deal with social media. I
Right.
left in 2007, before we had Twitter and before there were constant posting. The worst I had to do was like some live shots on CNN and file something with CNN radio and with Wire CNN. Now it's nonstop, literally
Yeah.
nonstop. But I have hope because I do believe there are young people who believe and want to educate, which is really what the role of a journalist is, and speak truth to power. The danger is if you're not working for someone, let's say it's a small news organization, someone who has some kind of background in what an editorial role is. Too much journalism has become opinion journalism versus the way I was raised and what I preferred, which was it's not my job to tell you what to think.
Right.
It's my job to present the facts as I can suss them out.
Right, exactly. I can remember I was at a conference and a woman shook her finger at me and said, "You're just fake news." And I asked her, "Where do you get your news?" She said, "Breitbart." And my jaw dropped and she said, "Well, I have to have my opinion reinforced. It's
Yes.
it's got to be
Yes.
informed."
Yeah. I look, so let's go back to that day or evening when I was sitting in the CNN booth on Capitol Hill and I got the call from the then president of CNN saying, I'm so, sorry, Andrea, but we're not going to be renewing your contract, blah, blah, blah. And, it was all I could do to kind of just, okay, all right, whatever, and get off the call before I burst into tears. But
Sure.
how lucky
Yeah.
was I? I look back on that. I am so grateful, John.
Let me ask
So
you this.
grateful that I was let go so that I could start to reinvent myself before there were a million other journalists out there.
How much time elapsed between that gut punch and when you could actually start to say you're glad that this happened? How long
I
how long
think
did it
I
take?
want to say it was probably a year,
Okay,
but it was a relief.
sure.
I think I very soon afterwards, what stung was the fact that they leaked it to whatever the blog was that
Oh,
covered our broadcast
industry.
news. They,
Yeah,
they leaked it that they had basically fired me. So I wasn't able, and I had been fudging the truth. I guess you could say I was lying. I was telling people that we hadn't been able to reach agreement on a new contract.
Yeah.
That wasn't the truth. The truth was they cut me loose.
Yeah.
So it just was the fact that I felt humiliated. I felt
Exactly.
like I had been kind of kicked to the curb, as so many people do when
Right.
they're let go. And I use the word fired, and some people I think mistakenly think that means it was for cause. I
Oh, good
didn't do
point.
anything wrong. I didn't. It's not like I was caught, lying in my stories
Yeah. Or
or
paying hush money
fudging
to
the
a porn
facts or
star.
paying hush money or anything. No, my contract, the cycle was ending and they decided not to renew it. And that's it. Like, it's a subjective thing. And the truth, my honest feeling is the woman that they replaced me with, Jessica Yellen, an exceptional
Oh, yeah,
journalist,
absolutely.
so talented. I have nothing but the highest regards for her. And thank goodness they replaced me with her. If they had replaced me with some like schmo who I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
best you can do?
I would
Yeah.
imagine too that when you go through something as catastrophic and as traumatic as that, and it can be the loss of a job or a loved one or a friendship or a pet, even whenever
Oh,
someone
yeah.
goes through something traumatic, emotionally traumatic, I think it really puts things in perspective so that, whatever happens in the future can't quite be as bad as that. Once you've gone through that, that becomes the gold standard for what you're able to handle. Am I onto something there? Does that make some sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I would say if we're really going to embrace that career magic method and the mindset that goes along with it, try to see the curveballs that happen in your life, as much as they suck and as much as they may hurt, as a doorway, an opportunity for you to walk through, and something even better is going to be on the other side. The one caveat, the only caveat is losing a child, losing a sibling prematurely. I
Well,
don't
we're both in
we
that
both
position.
experience that. What I will say is there are people, the woman who started MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. There are so many people who have experienced that kind of tragedy and end up using that pain, transmuting that pain
Right.
into something that goes on to save many more lives or ease the suffering
Yep.
of so many others. But I would say that's probably more the unicorn than it is the more common experience.
I mean, a
But
lot
I
of,
would say move
yeah.
through move through the painful experience,
I,
and I assure you there's going to be something incredible that's waiting to happen in your life on the other side.
Right. I mean, one of the things I tell people who have lost a loved one is, as awful as it is, uh, the experience that you're going through puts you in a position to be able to empathize
Oh,
with someone else
yes.
in the future and perhaps offer them a word of comfort and hope
Yes.
from the
That's a
perspective of the
beautiful.
other side.
Yeah,
Because
that's beautiful.
life does go on, and what you're
It
doing
does.
is providing people with, I think, the tools, the emotional tools, the psychological tools to use to build your own future.
Yes, and if I could just say what the mission is of the This Magic Life podcast, again, you can find it on YouTube. You have to type This Magic Life with Andrea Koppel, because believe it or not, there's another This Magic Life on YouTube.
Oh, no.
It's also on Spotify and Apple. I think I am the only This Magic Life there. But the mission is to inspire 1 million students and 20-somethings to stop fearing their future and start getting excited about all the serendipitous and magical opportunities that await them. And I say that having interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and seeing that through line. We cannot predict where the universe is going to take us. And sometimes what happens is going to be fairy dust. And at other times, it's going to feel like black magic. But in all instances, it can lead you to something that fills your soul, that fills your heart, and that gives you that feeling of passion and purpose that so many of us have hungered for.
Surfing serendipity. That's going to be your book, I hope. And you have a newsletter, Dose of
Yes.
Magic newsletter that people can
Yes.
subscribe to,
Yep.
andreakoppel.com/newsletter. And I would
Yes.
imagine that's going to include links to your podcast as well.
Yes.
Yeah, just a hunch.
Yes. Just a hunch. Yes. And the podcast, a new episode drops every Wednesday. And I've just had the joy already of interviewing so many incredible people, and they inspire me. And I know that they will inspire you as well.
Well, and the Time for Coffee was radio, or it was audio only.
It was
right?
audio.
And so now this guy has a video component as well, and it's very engaging, and you are following your curiosity. People can contact you if they want to get in touch with you personally. Let me throw your email up there,
Yeah.
Andrea@andreakoppel.com. What's next? Is there any project that's on the cusp?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
Why
this
am I
summer,
not surprised?
this summer, I'm going to be reworking that College to Career Clarity course. I'm going to make it shorter.
Okay.
And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to include some of the career magic method in there. I think that's probably a separate course that I'm going to create. And I'll offer these on a website that has yet to be created. But I will talk about it.
You're quite the entrepreneur.
I know. And this is the other, if we're going to end on any note, John, I don't want to tell you how to do your show, but here's another piece of wisdom to share. I don't know if it's wisdom, it's a fact. I have worked in 6 industries. I didn't study any of them. I didn't study any of them. I didn't study journalism. I didn't study PR, communications. I didn't study advocacy or the nonprofit space. Like, I was working in international development in addition to humanitarian affairs. Didn't study podcasting. Didn't study entrepreneurship. Didn't study writing, creating courses. I mean, all this stuff, right? This is all new. So what I do have are transferable skills.
Right.
And that curiosity and the desire to keep learning and growing. And these are all characteristics that you can acquire at any age.
Exactly.
At any age. And how beautiful to be 20 years old and get to do this, or 23 or 43, right?
Because it's all up here. It's all a matter of how you approach it.
Absolutely.
Oof.
Absolutely.
This has turned out better than I expected because
Oh my God.
I
What were you
really,
expecting?
well, I mean, I already had high hopes. So as I say, better than I expected, and I had pretty
Well, you
high.
didn't say it like that. You didn't say it
Well,
turned out even better than I expected.
yeah,
You
thank you.
said better than I expected.
It
I
is.
mean, intonation is everything,
It
John.
is. I know. And I need to work on that. And that's the problem with a live podcast. I'm not going to be able to edit that. But you're right. I mean, it's there's so much practical stuff here. And I really am hoping that people are going to be encouraged by what you've had to say
Mm,
and that they'll tap into other broadcasts, podcasts that you're going to do. So this has
yeah.
been fun. We've been
Oh,
oh,
well,
and is
sending
there,
you sending you a little heart. If we were on Zoom, we would have the red hearts that would be.
that's true. Is there anything else you want to talk about that I haven't brought up?
No, I think you covered the waterfront.
Okay, fair enough. We've been one-to-one with Andrea Koppel. I'm John DeDakis. And thank you, Andrea. This was fun.
Oh, John, I'm going to end by wishing you many, many more magical moments to come.
Thank you. To be continued.